the January 28, 2016 Walton County Zoning Board of Adjustment. If you would please stand as we have our invocation, followed by the pledge of allegiance. Ma'am, if you would, please
Can you bow your heads, please? Heavenly Father, as we gather here today, we hope that you give us the guidance and the wisdom to do what is best for the people of our community. Amen.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. You may be seated. Appreciate the board members that's here tonight. We have two board members that's not with us, Mr. Mark Miller and Mr. Scott is unable to attend. We do appreciate Carrie for all the hard work she does to put this meeting together.
You bet.
Planning Department personnel, there's a couple I don't think we've had an opportunity to be here before. Maybe we get to see how they do. Did they take Tim Brown's position? Did she take Tim Brown's?
No, sir, Tim in heavy cases tonight. We gave him a night off.
Oh my goodness.
If you're missing, we can
We don't want you to have to retrain
Finally
him.
got where he smiles when he comes. We do appreciate our attorney for her hard work and thank you for being here tonight.
Thank you.
Are there any what's it called? Announcements. Thank you. I don't have a little list.
I believe staff has announcements.
Mr. Chairman, as you may be aware, we have several requests to continue. You may handle these now or as we go through the agenda.
1 second. This may be inappropriate, but from time to time you meet people that does an extremely good job in their position, and unfortunately one of them, J.C. Alford, passed away, I believe, in December. He was the code enforcement board, and I thought a lot of him when he come before us, and I just want to say that it's going to be hard to be missed. He did a good job, and it's unfortunate.
Mr. Chairman, we absolutely agree with it. J.C. was one of the kindest men, did a great job in his role as code enforcement officer. As he was going through treatments, he would go get treatments and still come to work, even though he wasn't feeling well, and that just showed the quality of the individual he was.
I did not know that he was sick, and I question it because of the times that he was here, knowing afterwards he was going through those treatments.
Absolutely.
But he was always happy.
He was.
And he was honest, and I just had to say something. Sad to see him pass away. He was a great guy.
He was a great role model for everybody in the office because no matter how bad it was, he was always, as you said, smiling and had a very positive attitude. So he's greatly missed, and he's had an impact on, I believe, everybody here as far as what they try to aspire to be as far as their attitude goes.
Well, it seemed to change, so that's good. Go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, we have 3 requests for continuance. First one is the Frances T. Poll appeals. They are requesting to continue to the next meeting. And number 3 on the agenda is the SPG PR LLC appeal. They have also, staff is requesting to continue this to the next meeting. And also the number 4 on your agenda, the 385 LLC appeal. Staff is also requesting that this be continued to the next meeting.
We want to continue those to February?
Yes, sir, if it pleases the board.
Motion?
Motion to approve.
All in favor, aye?
Aye.
Item 1, 3, 4 is being continued. The number 2. So that's all 3.
Yes, that's
Continue to February.
What I'm saying is in one motion?
that's fine.
Okay, all right, just check.
What day is that?
February 25th.
February 25th. You ready to hear? Go ahead, Mr. Price.
Sure, I believe number 2 is next on the agenda, but the appellant's attorney is not here. I believe he was going to be a few minutes late, and they requested we move this one further down in the agenda if it's okay with the board.
Probably easier, just get it over before he gets here.
That's true too.
We will take go ahead and hear number 5, Barrett's request, and give the attorney the opportunity to come. So item number 5 is Melissa Henderson. Are you, sorry about that, Ward. Oh, man, that's not why I said that.
Melissa Ward, of
Okay.
Saxon LaSoar, representing the Sorrentinos.
Good deal. I was thinking, Melissa, go ahead.
And I'm sorry to interrupt, would you like us to swear in the witnesses at this time?
Goodness alive. We gotta swear everybody in. I got a little ahead of myself. Everyone here will have an opportunity to speak before this board. If you would, please stand, raise your right hand, that the testimony you give will be the truth. If you would.
Thank you. Do you all solemnly swear that the testimony you give before this board will be the truth? Thank you.
Okay, Ms. Ward.
So, I have some pictures and, evidence. I wasn't sure how many I did. Y'all threw me off. I thought it was gonna be 5 out of 6.
Here, can we have Scott
One
speak or
second,
Art?
please.
Sure.
His is a complete, the
I do not
chairman's.
have a thunder fire. I most likely lost.
Here we go. It was right there, I'm not sure where it went.
Sorry about that. You want to start with that?
No, we're good.
Okay, go ahead.
Like Christmas.
Jeez.
Always, I'm going to take photos, exhibit, 5A and the, data, 5B.
Okay.
You enter the exhibits, is that what we're doing?
Yes.
Exhibit 5A and 5B, so in there.
I was going to give you a slide presentation. Unfortunately, my computer and your computer are not talking to each other. So I will have to do it the old-fashioned way. Sorry, you'll have to listen to me listen. What I've handed out to you this evening, the one document has a letter from a narrative, Saxon LaSoar, and some attached exhibits that go with it. And they go through that. And then the other is a set of pictures, which I would like to keep a copy of. Okay. And I certainly apologize. I should have actually had this in time for you to have it in your packets. It was enough information to be able to longer to put together.
And just to make sure I understand, you're asking for from the board. You're asking for 3.5 clearance request on the west side,
Yes, sir.
and you're asking for a 5-foot clearance request in the rear,
Yes, sir.
and everything else is good. Front setback is good, right?
The front setback is good,
Okay.
but the east side is already built out of 0 lot line. So it's a 7.5 foot on the east side. It's a west side 3.5 foot variance, so that it's 4 feet instead of 7.5. And the rear is 10 feet, so it would be a 5 foot variance.
I lost you on the east side.
The east side, it says that the setback is 7.5 feet.
Right.
The request is a 0 foot setback, lot line. And so it's a 7.5 foot variance.
Oh, I missed that. So
Okay.
you're asking for 7.5 on the east side. it's already built?
Yes, sir.
Okay, go ahead.
All right. The property is Cottages of June Allen, and the Cottages of June Allen is uniquely a land condominium. And the governing documents for that land condominium were recorded in 1990. The buildings, most of the buildings were built in 1993, with the exception of maybe one or two. I think it was only one. And the property owners, Mr. and Mrs. Sorrentino, purchased their house in 1995. And the reason that those dates are important is that they predate the current standing code and plan.
When was the house built?
1993.
This house was built in 93, they
Yes, sir.
purchased it in 1995.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
And they have not changed the footprint of that house to date.
And land development code occurred in 1992,
6.
96.
The current code and comp plan was in 96. Now, they did have a code that they adopted in 92, but they, you know, that's the whole county history of whether or not that was accepted by the state, so that's a whole other deal. But the condominium documents were recorded in 1990. And I speak to it a little here, but I will say now,
Okay.
you recognize some people remember, or there are circumstances where if there were condo docs or recorded covenants in hand, in the early days of the building department, they recognized those as being the governing documents for that property rather than the setbacks that were adopted by the county. So this was built according to those condo documents in 93, even though there was a planning department in 92, and there was an adopted subdivision code in 92. So,
Absolutely, and they really didn't start enforcing these until
well, this did,
2006.
they started changing their policies in mid-2000s, yes, to recognize that covenants and restrictions that apply to land, they either have to be in conjunction with a development order that was approved that way by the Board of County Commissioners, or they had to be, they had to predate everything in usually for residential preservation lots. So it can be a little complicated. This didn't come up with Sorrentinos until this year.
Excuse me.
You know, to be fair, and to the defense of everyone that's ever worked for the county, it wasn't easy for them either.
I'm sure.
So let me just get through, let me just say the synopsis here. You have a family who has a house that they bought, and they were given these governing documents. They assumed that the governing documents applied because everybody's house is basically built the same to these governing documents. They go on, they've had the house since 95. They, you know, they rock on for many years, no problems, and they decide that they're going to do some interior work to the house, taking out some paneling, replacing the dishwasher, little things. Nothing that moves your power, nothing that moves your electric, nothing that requires an expansion of the house. So you don't really need any kind of excessive permit, you know. Immediately, like right then, at that very time frame, Mrs. Sorrentino's parents were in a significant and horrific car accident. You may have seen it on the news. A bus driver fell asleep, smashed into the car, and this elderly couple's car was thrown into traffic, and it was a lot. It's a big deal. They've gone through extensive rehabilitation. There are some continuing and permanent consequences to that, and they need 24-hour care. So they feel, they go out and they say, okay, we need to step up. The other siblings have jobs and families. They can't separate from their lives to take care of them. So they plan, instead of doing some small remodeling, you know, instead of just a new dishwasher, we need to enclose a porch that we have and make a room out of it and have some additional space on the back and things that are within the confines of their governing documents. They're not exceeding what they're allowed in their governing documents. The ARB says, their review board says, yeah, we're good with it, go ahead and get your permit. That's when they came up to the county, and the county said they can't do it. Now, the county's not wrong. There are land development code regulations that say you have to have a 7.5-foot setback. The way to resolve it is to get a variance. So that's why we're here today. They're trying to add on to the house by enclosing 2 porches and 1 small addition of a room in order to accommodate an elderly couple that cannot go upstairs and that need 24-hour care. And we can go through all the detail. I have a very nice elaborate speech, or if you'd like to shrink this meeting down even more than it already is, I can leave the floor. You can ask questions of the applicants or ask me any questions you like.
Why don't you let us, see the position of the
County?
staff?
Sure.
And then we will give you the opportunity to see if we need to go into detail.
Good evening, commissioners.
That's it.
Well, I think the position that I took on this particular variance was that the applicant would need to come and make their presentation to you for you to determine their hardship. It's not something that can go right into a report, something that you have to see and hear for yourselves to see if you believe that there is a true hardship involved. Otherwise, it does not interfere with, excuse me, let me start over there. Going back to the staff report, it does not contravene the goals, policies, codes of Walton County. It's merely is it considered a hardship where they have proved that they can have reduced setbacks. I would like to point out that they also did, there were no public comments except for one letter was sent, that is in your package, it's at the back of your package, and that was in support of this request.
But the question that I have with this is, I just noticed, I think there was, how many lots is built out, about 10? And if all of them is operating under the same, should we not be considering all of them at this time, or like we have before? I mean, there's 9 buildings that are built in this area. Should that not be addressed, or should there not, the homeowners association, should they not have presented it like we've had so many times recently to get this resolved?
Mr. Chairman, I agree with that, your assessment. However, we only noticed this particular parcel. If that were something we want to do for the whole neighborhood, we'd probably come back and have it re-noticed appropriately to cover all those lots. I believe the notice in the paper and the sign and so forth only mention this one lot. But I do agree, I think that maybe this may qualify from those issues we had recently, where the whole neighborhood would probably fall into the same scenario. But again, unfortunately, we didn't notice just this one applicant's parcel.
Okay.
And this one, would like to ask to listen to, I don't know, did this one ever receive a development order, or was it approved by the board or something? It is a little bit different in that it is a condominium, and they are single-family homes, but they have reduced setbacks on their sides.
Should I address it?
Yeah.
All that occurred in 1990, is that correct? 89 and 90?
That's true. They do have a condo plat that is recorded with their covenants and restrictions, which I'll submit to Carrie as evidence. And there is a condo plat in here back in 1990. So it does not on the plat specifically mention setbacks, but it does in the document that it's made an exhibit of.
That
So
was
it's,
recorded at the same time of the
Yes.
plat. That's
Yes.
which is make this part of it.
yes,
Yes.
And I believe this one would also require coming to the zoning board anyhow, because they're asking for additional reduction in setbacks from what was originally in their documents. So, due to the special circumstances.
Okay. Any questions? Commissioner? Alden?
Chair, this would be exhibit 5C.
You did what the exhibit 5C, which is,
The declaration of condominium
okay,
recorded.
very good. Any questions? Thank you, ma'am. Anyone from the audience like to speak in favor of this request? In opposition? Melissa, anything you want to add? Any questions for Melissa?
Actually, I wanted to look,
Can you walk us through the covenants and restrictions as they are?
Yes. And let me just say too, as far as those in favor, the packet actually includes 3 additional letters of people that are in favor of the variance. And the architectural review board approval is in that packet as well.
In this large packet here.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, Mr. Valley, specifically you were talking about the page, this.
Right.
Right. Which is just that one page excerpted out of 122 pages of covenants.
Right.
So specifically, the recorded covenants say that there will be no building or structure that shall be located on units 1 through 8 nearer than 20 feet to the front and 10 feet to the rear.
Okay.
That's our 10-foot rear setback that we're asking for.
Okay.
In addition, it says, and when you read it further down, it's about 3 lines down, it says, with regard to units 6, 7, 8, and 9, no building or structure shall be located nearer than 4 feet to the west boundary line. That's our 4-foot setback.
Okay.
Something that is unique to the situation, they don't mention an east side setback,
Mm-hmm.
and all of, the majority of the homes in that area have a 0 lot line. They've been built out to a 0 lot line. So, I think in just a moment ago in testimony, you heard, Ms. Vivian say that, or Ms. Shamel say that this is exceeding these, covenants and restrictions. It is my understanding or my belief that they interpreted that to be a 0 lot line, not that they are exceeding what they already are allowed. The ARB approved his building plans as being compliant with your current governing documents.
My only concern is that one's not addressed and recorded is, becomes an issue in terms of how we've looked at these in the past. Because what we've based our decision on in terms of community, looking at it just as a straightforward matter of following what was documented and everyone thought that they could get and purchase, was that it was noted somewhere, recorded in some form or fashion, that yes, that was the intent for this community.
For the zero side yard?
Or whatever variance from what we currently have.
I have not looked to see whether or not their documents that they had, that the ARB used to review against, besides these covenants and restrictions, are applicable, if they have any policies or memos that say this is how we look at these. I just, in reviewing each of the homes, they are all built with essentially a 0 lot line on one side of the house. So it appears, according to the ARB, that they interpret it the same way. Now, granted, I don't have whatever they are basing that on, other than they're looking at the same covenants and restrictions that I am. So it was my understanding from them that all of the houses were built out the same way. When you go and look at the subdivision, it is 9 houses. They're all very similar in form and stature, and they very much, this particular house, as you can see in the photos, is just like the house on either side of it. Each of the houses have these little pop-out walls that go out to one side of the property line, and the other side has about a 4-foot path between them. And so they appear to be very much similar in size. You have this set of pictures in front of you. What this is my car in front of their house, and that is a 20-foot front setback. I pulled up into their house and the house went out to 38. This second picture is the house right next door, showing that they are built, probably not as well, I'm not a photographer, but it's meant to show that they are built in line with the houses adjacent to it, so they're not exceeding or decreasing in a similar manner. This pathway that is between the houses, that's the 4-foot between the house from the east side of the house to there. That's the pathway, it's the pathway that they have between their houses. And there's a little bit more space there because you probably don't have to construct some of that. And then the path, and then the path between the other houses. They all have a walk path between them. Behind the house is a concrete path that leads to the amenity pool. And so there's a 9-foot easement there, there's a 3-foot concrete path that ends into the dirt and inside the pool. And they're very similar. In addition to some of the pictures in here, you might see where it looks like they started, where there's construction tore out. They were screened in porches, And like I said, they didn't think that they were gonna have to, go through a variance, they were just gonna do a building permit, and they stopped immediately when they found out that there was a problem. So this porches, specifically on this picture, you can see along the roof line where there's a roof line tether attached to the house, where they had taken a porch out in anticipation of building that, extending that window. So that, you know, there was some existing structure there that shows on the old survey that's in your packet, in conjunction with the new survey that shows that, you know, may or may not have been line.
Do you have a copy of the reported plat?
It's in the covenants and restrictions.
Does it show the
And it-
structures? Does it show the structures on the
No,
plat?
it doesn't. It was reported in 90, and they didn't build the houses until 93.
But it did not show a layout or anything?
No, no footprints.
No footprint?
And for the, you know, if anybody has any questions about how the land condominium part works as opposed to a platted townhome or a regular condo, Colleen Sachs from Sachs and Lesueur is here. She's been practicing real estate law for 30 years, so she can explain how they anticipated being able to maneuver within the property lines by using a condo, a land condo plat.
You want to hear that, Anthony?
Yeah, I would.
We're not good educated.
I hate to drag things out, but I think it'd be interesting, at the very least.
It's very interesting, at the very least.
I'm Colleen Sachs, I'm an attorney with Sachs and Lesueur. And yes, the land condominium is something that was used a great deal of the time, during that time period, so that people, they could take single-family residences and have a lot more flexibility within the bounds of the development, where they put things so that they could use a zero lot line scheme instead of having to worry about certain setbacks and things like that. It's just something that developers use to kind of manipulate the land so that they could be more flexible and allow the homes on the property that were a little bit different than to have these little paths that go through and also for purposes of how the subdivision, as it were, was ultimately maintained. So it was a development device.
Now, when I've seen these in the past, the way I was familiar with it was that the dwelling itself only owned the land that it occupied, and so you were deeded as you built.
Yeah, and that's absolutely the most common way they did it, so they didn't have to get into where the setbacks were, and they would have shown that on the actual drawings in the condominium declaration.
And so everything that was outside of the building envelope was common area.
Common area.
But, and that gave you great flexibility, but I'm confused because they have individual lots defined.
Right, in this case, what they wanted to do, and I'm not sure why this particular developer did it, but this particular developer also was involved with the development of the structures as well. And they lined them up on a zero lot line on one side and then allowed the development of the structure. And they would put the houses in.
So what do they actually own? I mean, so is it like a traditional one where they only own the footprint of the house? Or do they own their lot and have just common area that's shared?
That's exactly right. They own that rectangle of property instead of just the footprint. They have the rights to use all the land that's underneath it.
Okay.
But then the condominium association, and they're governed then as a condominium, which then gives them more ability to control what the character of the structures are and things, so that it's a lot of times your subdivision documents for a typical HOA, they'll have a building scheme, but they aren't quite as strict as you can do this with the building and that with the building.
But the end result,
They can.
sure, but the end result is they kind of made this a dirty process because they defined property, and at that point, they don't have that flexibility anymore because now they have to define sides and front setbacks, and they even went through the process of defining it themselves, and it just muddies the whole thing.
Right, but it was prior to Walton County having
Sure,
all of that.
sure, but just in concept, I mean, you
Right,
define a boundary, but you define an outer boundary,
right.
and then you have the flexibility within, you just define a unit, number of units, and you put them wherever you want.
In this case, they defined a boundary, but it was not just the footprint of the house. So
Okay.
they decided to have the
the zero lot line on one side, and they decided to be governed by Chapter 718 of the Florida statutes instead of Chapter 720.
So how much precedent is there in terms of, I mean, because we really don't know, because we don't have a survey of the whole thing. I mean, how many of these are actually, you know, zero? I mean, do we know for sure that they really are zero, or because?
Well, when you look at it, I think, do we have it,
They have it in,
property appraiser is in the packet.
Yeah,
They
property
do.
appraiser would show it approximately. That would show us
Yeah,
good.
it actually, there is a,
It's just where the
Oh, we can
houses
pull it
are.
up.
there's a photo, or the property appraiser's in there that shows that they're
It's this-
pretty close to being on the lot line if they're not on the lot
And,
line.
and we also know that the property appraiser, the lines on that particular map.
They shift, yeah.
They shift, but you can see particularly on the front, 3 lots that are, and ours is the middle one of those. Those are all lined up on the east lot line, it's a 0 lot line. And then the houses that are to the north of that are lined up on the north lot line. The 2 that are to the north are very clearly lined up on the north lot line. So it was part of their scheme of development.
Well, they're gonna go through all that. Just flap their property in the middle of the road like everyone else did.
Yeah, I'm not sure why they chose this, but it is what they did.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So,
Thank you.
and also our clients are here tonight too, and I know they would like an opportunity to speak to you a little bit about the reasons why they need to have the living quarters here on the lower level of the house, as opposed to being able to expand upstairs and everything. If you would like to hear from them.
Sure, we will, but this is not a standard condo. They kind of manipulated the interpretation of the condo regulations to put the buildings on there.
Well, it is a land condominium, which is a valid form of development. Why
But
they
it's
chose it?
not a standard,
It's not your standard one where you have a building that shows up on your site plan, on the documents. For example, these documents just show the rectangles for the property as opposed to showing an actual structure. And even with a lot of land condominiums, they show that the only thing that the person owns is the footprint of the house. In this case, they actually own outside of that footprint.
and what's the difference in townhouse and a condo?
Well, a townhouse is gonna be governed by, Chapter 720, and the townhouse, they own the dirt that is that's underneath. With a condo, you own the rights to be on a specific part of the land, but you don't have the dirt.
For this particular one, they own the dirt.
Well, in this case, they're allowed to use the dirt, but it's all part of the
They're
condo,
renting it.
if that makes sense.
So they don't own the dirt.
But they don't, technically, they don't own it, they own all the rights to use it. Just as if you're in a condo and you're on the first floor, you own the right to use what's under you, and then you own the right to use airspace above that. So that's how that would work in a condo. With a townhouse, they actually do own the dirt, and in some cases with a townhouse, they own a little outside of that dirt as well. But that's it, and of course the common wall.
They own a second floor condo. They don't own what's underneath them.
Right, right.
Pardon me?
This house doesn't own what's underneath. They're a second floor condo. They're on the second floor. They don't own what's underneath them.
Okay.
I'm
They don't know
looking,
what's above.
I'm looking for Alan Funt.
See what I mean?
I'm looking for Alan Funt.
And what this does, and instead of, because they didn't have it be just a strict building, it did give the people that purchased these homes flexibility to do just what we're asking to do tonight, which is to add on to it in some way. If it were a land condominium that they only owned the footprint, they'd no longer be able to have that flexibility to add on. And adding on, as you'll find out here, is.
So they don't own the land on this.
No, but they own the right to use
Yeah.
the land
Is that a
all
lease?
around.
Is that a 99-year lease?
It is not, the land is owned by the condominium association. The condominium association has a legal description, and that legal description says, this is the whole condo, and then it describes where the buildings or the use rights are going to be. And in this case, it has a use right of this piece of property.
Okay. Is this still used, Mr. Dykes?
I'm sorry?
Do you still allow this type of use?
I believe we did, yes, sir.
Okay. That's, you answered my question.
Yeah, you do see them from time to time. In fact, there are places in South Florida that I've seen land condominiums that make the point even more that they are part of all one thing, they actually build an underground wall to attach them. It's just, it's strictly a contrived thing, but it's how they make that work so that they can use the condominium as they need to.
Well,
The honors are here, we'll be glad to listen to.
All right, thank you. If I would like to stand up and tell them who you are.
Okay.
State your name for the record, please.
Thank you for hearing us on this petition. I'm Bob Sorrentino, and this is my wife, Robin. Unfortunately, about a year ago, Robin's parents were involved in a serious bus accident. Some of you may have seen it on national news. It was a bus driver that fell asleep and ran into the back of them. And that caused us to reevaluate the improvements to this house to accommodate their needs. Her mother's been determined to be mentally incompetent and requires around-the-clock care. And if you look at what we're doing in these improvements, we are modifying the home to accommodate these needs. We will have home care to assist us, but Robin and I are the only ones in the family that are retired and have the time to spend with the parents. Her siblings and spouses both work. So that's the primary reason why we're here today and requesting this variance.
Any
If you have
questions?
any questions, we feel free to answer any questions you may have.
I think we're good. Thank you very much. We appreciate you coming. Melissa, you want to close?
Okay. In closing, the board has the ability to grant variances based on unique circumstances, and they don't have to be necessarily a hardship like a wetland that you can't build on or something. It can be based on a unique situation. This individual has a piece of property that has governing documents that predate the existing setbacks, and that is unique. Maybe not so much for Walton County, but it's unique. And it's unique that they were planning on doing a few situational things inside the house, and a catastrophic incident involving her parents changed their life and requires them to put in improvements that would, while they would meet their governing documents, would contravene the code as it stands today. So we're not asking that you allow them to do something just so they could have more of what they already have, but rather allow them to accommodate parents who need 24-hour care, and only to the extent that their governing documents that predate the code allow.
Any questions?
not for me.
Thank you very much. Motion to close it?
Make a motion to close?
Second. Second.
All in favor, aye?
Aye.
Motion to approve?
Motion to approve.
Second? Second. Discussion? Discussion? We have no discussion, we don't have to close it, do we? Tommy, how do you vote?
Aye.
Bill?
Aye.
Kevin?
Aye.
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 You have received your variance request.
Thank you very much. Thank you
Good luck to you.
so much.
Thank you for the free legal.
We,
Lesson learned tonight.
could you go over it one more time? No, I'm kidding.
At this time, I do believe we will go back to item number 3.
Two, I think, yeah.
Item number 2. You don't need this book, do you?
No, sir.
Item number 2 is the attorney. good way to complicate things in a condos, land condo, isn't it?
It does, but those are, those are new concepts, and a lot of times the codes are not somewhat antiquated and have to catch up to the new development. I remember, Tom, you didn't have any regulations at all for cell towers.
Did I now?
So I recall a time you didn't have any kind of regulations for cell towers, and those were springing up, and you had to come and address that through amendments to the code.
I don't need one, it's okay. Yeah, I'll get back to you.
I suppose it would be easier if we done this without the attorney.
He didn't listen to you, Joe.
Mr. Chairman, this is exhibit 2A.
Exhibit 2A,
2A.
this is the Watson appeal.
Gregory Yuri, chimney flue appeal.
Mr. Watson,
Yes, ma'am.
state your name to the record.
Franklin H. Watson.
Present your
Yes, sir.
case for the appeal. Now, you understand, before we get started, you do understand that it takes 4 votes to overturn the decision of the planning director. You have 7 members total, we have 5. So you got to be pretty good, or you have the right to take and postpone, hopefully we have 7 the next time. You also understand, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, your appeal process is to the circuit court. If our decision is not favorable for your client, then your appeal process is to the circuit court. I do believe that it's advised, if you are entertaining that you probably need to have a court reporter to make that case to the circuit court. I do want you to understand that.
Yes, sir. I appreciate that. I don't need litigation, so I wouldn't even know how to call a court reporter. So I appreciate the advice.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
I don't believe he's been sworn in. He came in late.
That's right. Do you swear that the testimony you give before this board will be the truth?
I do.
Thank you.
Do you have to swear in, attorney?
No, not really, only if you're going to give fact, but just in case, just in case you're going to present facts to the board, I think we'll be covered.
If you do, okay. Do
Right.
you want us to go in here tonight with the 5 board members?
So, I might defer to my architect over here because he has a good relationship with the client, but I'm just trying to make sure. So, we've got 5 board members, essentially I'd have to get 4 of you to go along with it.
Yes.
And on another evening, are you saying that I might have 7 and I may be 4
Yeah,
out of 7?
there's 7 total board members to the zoning board
Normally.
adjustment. 2 are absent tonight.
And if I get a no tonight, I gotta go appeal it. I can't go back here.
That's correct.
Interesting. How often do y'all have 7 members here?
Most of the
Yeah,
time.
we're pretty good.
We would try real hard if you want to continue in February, if we have some other contingencies, we will try to encourage everyone to be here.
We can solicit beforehand and let him know, I guess.
Kevin, have you are your schedule for February?
I've got it
He
booked.
usually don't show up. They don't want to show up.
Sure. I feel pretty comfortable with what we're asking today, but that being said, I understand the law of averages and numbers, and let me ask if we wait a month, so to speak, whether that would actually cause a problem.
Absolutely, we give you that option.
I guess we're going to that.
Okay?
You know, Chairman and board members, when I looked at this, essentially what we're dealing with is a client that has a home that has a chimney that is essentially being cantilevered, and we've got the presentation to go over. And what I wanted to do, and I might bounce around a little bit, but what we want to talk about today essentially is the chimney being part of the roof structure. It actually is the way that it's part of the roof structure. The fact that the just giving you a little bit up front, the fact that the chimney essentially is a cantilever deck, which above that deck is built a flume. In our situation, we've got a fireplace that's inside, and the only part of the structure that we're talking about at all is the flume that's outside the exterior wall of the home. So no living space, nothing of that nature, essentially two pipes venting the actual fireplace. And I'll get into exactly the two factors which I think are most important, but that increases the safety factor within the home because the flue is actually outside the home envelope, the concrete envelope of the actual home. I want to talk a little bit today about how the flue essentially is akin to a mechanical device that is serviced home, similar to pool equipment, similar to your AC units. I mean, we really believe that we're trying to capture the spirit of the code and what we're asking for today. But also we're going to point out some things that the planning departments had to deal with over time with allowing certain things placed in the setbacks due to the fact that, you know, Walton County, we've got a problem where there's no minimum lot size. And so what you end up with is you're stuck with setbacks and people trying to maximize the living area, and invariably you start putting your mechanical equipment that services the home in the setbacks. And we do that with ACs, we do that with trash containers, we do that with pool equipment, all of them servicing the home or pieces of the home. And essentially that's what we're here today, is really to talk about that. This is a mechanical device essentially servicing the home. We're not looking for extra space, and we do think that it helps the integrity, the architectural integrity of the home. And feel free to stop me at any time.
Is this a wood fireplace or a gas fireplace?
Yes, sir, it is.
It is a wood fireplace.
Yes, sir, it is. The reason I'm giving you part of the code to begin with, and there's a few things that are in the handout that you have, but it's not actually in the presentation. Really, it's just the first 4 or 5 pages, which are part of the code, and then like two pictures in the very back. What I highlighted for you is really the intent, dealing with the development, design, and improvement standards. The intent provisions are intended to ensure functional and attractive development. And that's what we want to accomplish with the code. And today, I think what's key is the functionality is the safety that we get provided by putting the flames outside the home. And then the the architectural integrity, the attractiveness that this little added architectural feature does help the attractiveness of the home. The bottom of the page, on the page that I provided, it talks about the building setbacks, and that's where you're looking at. It talks about building setbacks for single-family residential homes, 7.5 feet in size, 15 in the rear, and 20 in the front. And it talks about all structures erected. I just included that to kind of tie it over. The next page is 5.00.07, which is the paragraph that Mr. Dice referenced with regards that at the end, he didn't feel like that this ended up, that it essentially would be prevented because essentially only the cantilever decks and the roof overhangs are allowed per this section. And what I thought was important to point out was if you read this line by line, the second sentence, not the first one, the second one, it starts talking about what is allowed, what's excluded, and what's actually subject to. And the first sentence talks about that second sentence, lot line fences are specifically excluded. Didn't say anything about chimneys, didn't say anything about flume, anything of that nature. Second paragraph talks about elevated walkways, patios, porches, decks are subject to setback requirements. Again, no reference to chimney, no reference to flume. Could have been easily written in there, but it's not. Talks about both the above ground swimming pool and below ground swimming pool and associated decks are subject to. But today, we also allow within the county setbacks are in effect the pool equipment, the pumps, the filters, the mechanical equipment that actually functions with that. But it talks about the pool being subject to, again, no reference to chimney or flume. And then it goes into cantilever decks, and it talks about cantilever decks and roof overhangs being subject to setbacks. However, subject to deck overhang may extend a maximum of 18 inches into the setback if they are at least 8 feet above ground. Now, we, in an effort to try to address that section and to allow us to come within the spirit of the code. I mean, first off, when you read this, there's nothing referencing about the chimney. It doesn't give us really any guidance. And, you know, I struggle with today, are we actually asking for guidance from the board of whether chimneys can or cannot be in the setback, or am I asking for variance? Because I don't think the code says chimney, it doesn't say you can't do. But if I want to get literal, it probably is better to say, you know what, on a case-by-case basis, I can understand if y'all wanted to address chimneys and dip it in the setback. And in our case, the way our chimney is designed, I think it's particular to our circumstances, and I think it allows you to give us a variance if you choose to do so. The chimney, the way it's designed, is actually part of the roof structure. And it is done in a fashion, the way that we'd like to do it, where it would be less than 18 inches cantilevered. It'd actually be almost 13 feet. We're going to get to a drawing above the ground. I think part of the intent when the code was done, and the reason you have this in the 8 feet, was to try to preserve view corridors. And so at 13 feet, you don't have an issue with view corridors being impaired. And again, going back to I've got a note down here talking about the AC and the pool equipment. I don't want to be a dead horse, but I think that this is a mechanical structure servicing the house to vent fumes, and we liken it to that. And you don't get variances for pool equipment that's put into a setback. But I also understand that you're here to grant variances, and so the next page, we actually kind of have a diagram of exactly what we're doing with the chimney. There's a solid concrete wall around the entire home, and the fireplace is within the wall, and the flume is outside the wall. And that's what I was talking about, that the flume is actually increases fire safety by putting that outside the exterior envelope of the home. And I think that's a very important thing here, the way it's designed. We're not just increasing living space, we're not pumping out the wall. The other thing right here, section 6, talking about ancillary temporary structures and uses. I just included this because I looked all through this code, couldn't find chimneys, couldn't find pool equipment, couldn't find anything that guide what we can put in the setbacks to service homes that we're doing today, and we're basically forced to. And this section, this is in here literally for you to be able to see that there's nothing in there. There's no guidance with regards to those items. It's talking about ancillary buildings, quote unquote, real structures, not necessarily equipment. The first picture that we have up here was actually a drawing, and I'm going to let you discuss my knowledge. I was not part of the meeting with the architect. We have an architect up here, but my understanding is that essentially this drawing was presented to him as a description in a way to kind of convey what we're trying to do in hopes to relay the essentially step-by-step progression to where we ended up. The first is an example is if you look at the code, it is a cantilever deck with railings, which would be allowed if you brought a house in and when the cantilever over the setbacks is 8 feet. This is not, again, indicative to us per se because we're 13 feet, but it shows railing. The next house deals with a solid wall around that cantilever deck that my understanding would be approved based on current drawings if somebody made the planning department and building department. The next is a cantilever deck with posts or columns that are holding up the roof above it. That would be approved. And then my understanding, again, I wasn't in the meeting, but the next two are essentially showing a pipe flume. Instead of it being encased in concrete, it's showing pipes as if you were to use that instead of having an actual full-blown chimney. And it's my understanding that in looking at those, Mr. Dice felt like he could approve that. However, as you got further down the page and you started looking at a larger concrete structure, the concern became that we're sticking part of the actual big structure into the setback, and I can understand his preference to have guidance from y'all versus just saying, you know what, we're going to allow this. But if you look at it from the side, these are showing a side view. What we're going to do is go actually to some more head-on views to try to show that this is just where we're just turning it slightly. Again, that's the deck that would be approved based on current. Please correct me if I'm wrong.
He will.
Sure. My understanding that would be approved if that walked in the door today, if we're just focusing on the deck. And that was with rails that you can see through. The next is essentially a solid wall around that deck. The next picture is showing the cantilevered deck with columns. The next is where you have the flume that is not encased in concrete. The next is where you start essentially adding the cantilevered deck that we had with the wall encased around it, which was on picture 2, with the flume coming out of it. And then the third is where the concrete is carried on the wall. And we're talking about 18 inches here. And that's why I asked to have the same pictures shown straight on. And if you look at the spirit of the code, and you talk about view corridors, again, we're trying to leave the view corridor underneath the deck open, as suggested in the code that is allowed. And as you progress through the pictures, you compare the unencased flume to the encased flume. The actual visibility is not changed for somebody walking down the street or riding the bike. I would actually suggest that the overall house looks much better and would add to the community better rather than having the pipe. But again, we are trying to capture the integrity of the code and the spirit. The next is the drawing that you already have a chance to look at as far as just a cross-section of the chimney and showing how it is separate. We're not bumping out any living space. We're not trying to increase our square footage. This is strictly an architectural integrity question and a safety issue. And can we do this given the circumstances that we're building in with regard to being so far off the ground and really trying to understand where everybody's coming from. Also, the pictures that are involved are actually homes that are either under construction or have been constructed over time in Walton County. And I'm not making any representation of whether it's planning department in the last 6 months or 10 years ago. This is just conditions that are currently happening in Walton County or have been allowed. This is actually a chimney that extends all the way to the ground. And if you look at it, you can see that it actually extends from the top floor all the way to the ground and actually sticks into the setback. It's not cantilevered at all. It's actually under construction. The next is a home that's also under construction. The prior home is Gulf front. This home is also Gulf front. It is a chimney that sits on the ground and continues all the way above the roof line. Again, has not taken into account conditions that we would like to build in, which would try to address some of Mr. Dyke's concern. The next these are actually 2 chimneys. It's a gray house and a tan house side by side. They're actually chimneys that are cantilevered over the setbacks. Obviously, and you can also see the air conditioning equipment and stuff that's allowed in the setbacks, the other mechanical items. This is the other home that's just showing the air conditioning and the structures that actually are put in the setbacks that actually do block the view corridor versus what we're proposing today. And again, I'm just going to go through these. So these are just additional examples. This is air conditioning that have been put in the setbacks, a grinder pump, again, mechanical items that are servicing the home. Again, an air conditioner, or air conditioner. This is an air conditioner and a hot water heater that's cantilevered off the side of the home. Above the 8 foot, there's a trash bin down below it. And then there's actually, this is where a cantilevered living area has been cantilevered out above the setback area. I would venture to say that this additional 18 inches or 24 inches, depending on what that overhang is even more in the setbacks. Again, we're not trying to do this. We're not trying to do a loophole around the system in order to get some additional square footage. This is showing pool equipment that's in the setback and the encasing that, again, is placed in the setback. Same home, it's just showing where there's some air conditioners probably closer to the front of the home. And this, again, shows some living area that's been bumped out. And I'm also not implying whether these ever got variance, or should have got variance or anything. I'm just showing how, it's not like we're coming up with something that's never been done, and we definitely are conscientious of our responsibility. This is, again, tool equipment, ACs, same thing here, ACs. This is actually structure that's bumped out, you have living area that are brought outside the setbacks. And then looking down again, you've got some more living area that's been placed out into the setbacks, cantilevered over. This is a picture of a fireplace that's actually cantilevered into the roof line. And that's something else I want to point out is that the way we want to place a chimney is that it would actually, while it's part of the roof structure, it would not actually be totally enclosed by the roof. And there again, I think decreases the chance of fire, or at least helps us increase the safety. And this is another fireplace that has been cantilevered out over the setback. Basically, that's the presentation. I mean, you know, we maintain that, you know, the roof, the chimney is part of the roof structure. The code doesn't specifically address it, but in order to try to give you something to hang your hat on and to understand where we're coming from, is that, you know, it is part of the roof structure. We have cantilevered out 18 inches. We have gone above 8 feet. We're essentially dealing with a cantilever deck with a roof with a flume structure coming above it that's incorporated into a vertical roof to conceal the flume from elements. And you know, again, it serves a mechanical function similar to ACs, other tool equipments, and it provides a safety, increased safety. And so the only thing that's going to be required that would be a cantilever of this is strictly the flume. It is not, again, a living area. It's not the firebox. It's nothing else. And I think based on our situation of the way that we want to build this, we're in hopes today that you'll give us a variance or take the position that the code doesn't prevent chimneys from being built in this community. Any questions?
Any questions at this time from the board? We will hear from Mr. Rice. We will give you the opportunity to come back before the board.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I believe they mentioned the variance process several times. I believe that we wholeheartedly agree this should be a variance process, not necessarily an appeal process. I think all the things they talked about as far as their building goes probably are all reasons or valid reasons to grant a variance, and so we would not oppose that. I think in this case, we have a lot that's very small, trying to build a bigger house on a lot, and they need more room, and this is how they're trying to get it. Well, the appeals process is really more of a global issue rather than a specific parcel issue. Setbacks are throughout the whole county, and anything like this is very impactful to not just this one property, but to all the properties in the county. I saw a lot of pictures and so forth. By looking at those, I can't verify if those properties have been given variances or they meet the setbacks. I have no idea as far as, you know, all the pictures that were shown, whether those were even things that did not meet the setbacks. I have no idea. But if there are things that were approved at some point in time that was wrong, I don't believe it's right to keep doing everything wrong just because it's been done before. So we want to try to correct that and get on the right path. I know historically, as far as chimneys go, specifically about chimneys, when the Alice Beach PUD was approved, Alice Beach requested a variance in their PUD documents to allow chimneys in the setback. So at some point in time, the county did say, hey, listen, if you want a chimney in setback, you have to get a variance. And the Alice Beach PUD did that, and they are allowed to build their chimneys in setback. You know, when it comes to interpreting the code, you know, the code in Walton County has a lot of areas. It's very complex, and there are a lot of areas to interpret. The one guiding principle you have to follow is I have to follow the clear language of the code. The spirit, the intent, those things are all great, but I have to follow what's in the black and white. And I'm just going to go through a couple slides, Mr. Chairman, if I could, kind of outline what our position is. The first slide is basically about rules of interpretation. This is what I'm bound by when I have to make interpretations as far as the code goes. And the first one says, in the interpretation and application of this code, all provisions shall be liberally construed in favor of the objectives and purposes of the county, essentially. says that the planning director is responsible for interpreting the code and shall look to the Walton County Council plan as guidance when necessary, when it provides guidance. This slide tells what the power of the board is. To hear and decide appeals when it's alleged there is an error or any order, requirement, decision, or determination made by an administrative official in enforcement of this code. This is what gives you, this board, the authority to make these determinations. These aren't variances, these are appeals. It's a different process altogether. And here's the building setbacks. Now, in my experience, 7.5 feet side yard setback is fairly liberal. Most are 10, some are 15 in some communities. 15-foot rear, fairly liberal. Some are more than that. So the county has already sort of expanded the footprint, or you can build on a lot by, in my opinion, fairly liberal setback requirements. And so, you know, there's, to me, ample room to develop within those setbacks. The methodology requirements, and this is how you determine what setbacks are. And I think the key thing is it says that all setbacks referred in this chapter shall, in chapter 5, are measured from the lot line adjacent to the point of measurement to the closest vertical improvement. Now here's where I think there's a distinction here. And he mentioned the above ground pools and so forth, but it makes only two exceptions of what can be in a setback. The two exceptions are deck or roof overhangs may extend a maximum 18 inches. So the maximum you can go is 18 inches over the setback line for a deck or a roof overhang. And so in my mind, and the way I interpret this is that if it's on a deck or a roof overhang, it's not allowed to be hanging over into the setback. So to me, it's pretty clear. It's something we've tried, you know, again and again and again. This is not the first time this has come up for us. If we've told someone you have to move that setback. This is not something that's unique. We've done this numerous times. By saying you can't have whatever, you know, your roof overhang can't be 24 inches. It can only be 18 inches. Your cantilever deck can only be 18 inches. It can't be 24 inches. We had a code case or a variance case recently, about a year ago, when this was approved when it should have been, and they had to come and seek a variance from this board because they extended further into the setback than what was allowed by the code. We had two people tonight asking for variances from this board for setback variances. And so setbacks to me are some of the basic core principles of any land development code that has to be maintained. And so we feel very strongly that these things are very clear and they should be adhered to. If anything, they might want to go back and shift the house a different direction, maybe redesign, whatever it is, redesign the house so it'll fit instead of having to go this route and trying to, or seek a variance rather than trying to look at this on a global level from all setbacks.
Isn't that up there, except the deck or the roof overhang may extend a maximum of 18 inches? That's allowed, right?
Yeah, it is, yes, sir.
Like
for those two circumstances.
Like his pictures show, a deck would be allowed.
A deck would be allowed, yes, sir.
But his chimney is not allowed.
That's correct.
Can I ask Wayne a question?
Sure.
Did I understand him correctly that if he hadn't enclosed that pipe, that you would approve that?
You know, we had some discussions about the pipe. My concern was from the building code perspective, and what my concern was is the pipe. If the building code makes a special exception for that, then I was willing to do that. I thought the Billy Beard, I don't believe that the building code mentions that whatsoever. The building code only mentions the height above the actual building, the roof of the building, not anything projecting out. I was doing all I could to try to find a solution for them. Ultimately, I've talked to Greg many times. We try to find solutions, we don't try to find problems. In this case, there was no solution that I could see based on this language. And so, so we try to find a solution here. But, but the only thing that's allowed is a deck and a roof overhang, and, a deck and an enclosed chimney is like a chicken and a duck. They're not the same thing at all. They're close, not the same thing at all. They all walk on two legs, but they're not the same.
One other question then. He said that mechanical devices to service the home. That'd be a duck in the duck, wouldn't it?
Well, we saw some pictures, and that's something that we've been dealing with as far as pool pumps and pool decks. I know right now, we've got an issue right now where we're being requested to look at the interpretation of pool decks and equipment for pools. When I read this, it says above ground swimming pools and their associated decks are subject to these setback requirements. To me, when it says pool, that means pool and its equipment. So, if they came in today.
Doesn't say that though, does it?
Right, but it says, well, in my opinion, the pool itself includes the equipment that goes along with the pool. And that's one of the things you have to do, you have to make some interpretations, or else, things will get out of hand.
But is the chimney mechanical as the air conditioning unit?
No, I think the distinction there, because the chimney is actually attached to the house. I mean, it is part of the vertical improvement, part of the vertical structure.
But it's part of the mechanical.
To me, a chimney is really more of a architectural element to me.
It's just a tall, skinny deck that's solid.
Architectural element outside and inside, because how do we use chimneys for? Very, very, not really very well.
You don't think
Now,
that's
if this was 1910 and you didn't have any central AC and air, then it might be a mechanical piece of equipment, because it's absolutely needed.
Now, there's structure and then there's ventilation, and if this was a direct vent fireplace and they had a vent out the side, it would project out about 6 to 8 inches, and you guys wouldn't even have seen it or looked at it.
We may not have, and in that case, I think the building code does go into that, and I think that's what Billy Goodard and I talked about as far as the building code, about the ventilation of these things. If there's something like that, we could probably look at that.
But we have...
But you're right, Tony, we wouldn't even notice that most likely.
You wouldn't even notice it, but also, with good reason you wouldn't notice it, because it's not something that's an obstruction, it's not a ground obstruction, it's above 8 feet. It meets the spirit of what's in the code. We have, water heaters have moved to the outside for lots of good reasons. It's more energy efficient, it saves space, our real estate's very expensive. Every house that's built to that 7-foot line that has a water heater, or even a dryer vent that has a cover on it, is technically not compliant with the setback regulations. These pieces of equipment have all been treated separately. We have been allowing air handlers in there. I really am kind of terrified that you're looking at not allowing pool equipment in there, because that seems really out there. But I'll go on the record saying I disagree with the deck portion of the pool in general. I think that's silly. We have other parts that are going to help with coverage, lot coverage, and noise. We allow fences. People are allowed to build a deck that's not attached to their pool all the way to the property line. So it just doesn't make sense on that side. But we have equipment that's been in these setbacks for good reason, consistently, never been questioned. A fireplace is a piece of equipment. They're not adding square footage to the interior of the house by doing that. What we fear and we want to protect against are the things like what we see here, where we get bump out of whole building spaces, and we have houses that are cantilevering, 18 inches on each side all the way around the entire house. That's what we're trying to get away from. But the truth is that by interpreting decks liberally and allowing that, we technically can do that now. This frightens me more than talking about fireplaces and water heaters and pool equipment.
AC units.
Because technically I think that limited bays should be allowed, but it's not. But I just fear that we're going too far past the intent. I mean, because again, AC equipment's not mentioned in here. No equipment's mentioned here. I understand why you call that not a vertical improvement, but it is attached to the house. It's physically connected.
But I think as you have to read this, it says, with the exception of decks or roof overhangs. It says, with the exception, I think the clear intent when this was adopted many years ago was, we're going to allow decks and roof overhangs. I mean, so because they accepted that out of there, they made a conscious effort to say, but we will allow decks and roof overhangs, nothing else. Now, you made a point a minute ago about how these things are evolving. And now you're seeing these things outside of it. And things do evolve, construction does evolve. But this was written at a time when it was very clear what happened. We can't change what it says. I think you get in a lot of danger when you start coming in and changing what it says. There's a method to change what it says, and that's the amendment process. When construction evolves, to me, that's the process of amending the code to reflect the new standards or new evolution in construction, not by going and trying to change something that was said. I think there's a clear process that the county has for amending the code to allow these things.
Now, let me add to that. A deck is not a railing, but a deck has a railing if it's 8 feet above the ground. it
Sure.
has to have a railing,
Sure.
unless
Correct.
you make that railing be 18 inches in, or, you know, respecting the setback, and the deck itself can go. So, you know, it's not, it can't address every piece, and we've had that discussion, and we've, you know, agreed with you in the past, like, it can't include every single piece, but there is a logic, and a piece of equipment on the outside, it makes sense that we would exclude that, but fireplace is really a piece of equipment. Now, the Alice Beach comment you brought up, which you used as part of the thought process, what they were doing is taking the fireplaces to the ground, not 8 feet above the ground. What they wrote it in for is because they feel like a fireplace in a traditional building should look like it is supporting things and thereby needs to go to the ground. So the reason for that one is really an aesthetic and, you know, a matter of tradition. And I don't think it really is part of this. I mean, it's really a separate thing.
Right. Here's the fear when you have interpretations of code and things. This begins with this, with the fireplace. Where's it end at? Well, you guys allow a fireplace, what's next? And then before you, and this is something I've seen throughout my career, and it's something that happens, if you're a staff person, you say, oh, okay, you can do a fireplace, go ahead. The next person comes in and says they want this, I want a 10-foot deck, and the next thing you know, you got a wraparound deck around your house that's at 18 inches in setback. That's the progression that you see, because word does get around, and everybody tries to push the envelope, and you've got smaller and smaller lots, and trying to do more and more and more on smaller and smaller lots.
But technically, we already allow the deck. They could wrap a deck all the way around the house.
You could, but they go 24 inches, just like we had before, 24 inches, and we're showing some pictures. What we're trying to do is maintain the integrity of the code, and if there is a need to amend it, by all means, we'll be totally in favor of amending it to include the new construction methods that are out there, and any kind of new evolution in construction. We are, by all means, will be more than happy to look at that and bring that forward as an amendment if that's the case. We mentioned earlier, at the point in time, you didn't have any cell phone tower regulations at all. Rather than new invention, all of a sudden you start trying to keep up with that, and you have cell phone tower regulations. And that's just as an example.
So, to clarify, currently, equipment is allowed. Equipment that is part of the house that, you know, services the residents is allowed. You know, electrical panel, it sits on the wall. The wall's on probably the setback line. It's in the meter, and the meter can be, you know, as much as 12 inches. AC, that one could be interpreted either way. The water heaters are definitely attached. All the panel boxes. So currently, equipment is allowed. Vents. But we're saying is that habitable structure is certainly not, but decks are, and a roof overhang is.
And I think the distinction there is that this is a part of the home, this is an attachment to it. I mean, it is part of the main structure, part of the roof line, all those things. That's the part that I believe makes a clear distinction from all the things you mentioned in this particular case. Because when I look at that, I'm looking at this matrix. I'm not thinking about pool decks, I'm not thinking about pumps, I'm not thinking about ACs, I'm thinking about a chimney as opposed to a cantilever deck or roof. That's my scope of what I've been asked to interpret, not all the other things. I mean, to me, it's all good points, but for this case tonight, all I looked at was just these things: a chimney, and then is a chimney a cantilever deck, or is it a roof overhang? And I said it's not. Mr. Chairman, we also have counsel for staff here, Ms. Carrie Parsons from Neighbors Giving. She'd like to say a few words.
She was part of the planning department.
Well, she is. She's just
I didn't know she was a contractor.
I like to blend in.
We don't listen to legal.
Thank you.
We listen to Sydney.
Yeah, we listen to
Occasionally.
Sid. We don't listen to county legal.
Good evening, board members. My name is Carrie Parsons. I'm from Neighbors Giblin and Nickerson in Tallahassee, and I'm here tonight on behalf of the Walton County staff. I do not want to regurgitate everything that Mr. Dice just said to you. I just want to hit home a few points tonight. We are here for an interpretation of the code. Appeal, not a variance, although, as Mr. Dice said, a variance might be potentially a good option in this case. However, tonight, this meeting was noticed for an interpretation of an appeal of the director's, interpretation of the code. As part of the law, an individual who is charged with interpreting a regulation or a code, the law requires that individual look first at the plain language of that regulation or that code. And if the plain language is maybe it is time for an amendment, to take place to the LDC to actually allow and include that in it. But at this time it doesn't, and Mr. Dice was charged with looking at the plain language and interpreting it. And the plain language makes it abundantly clear that under the spirit and the intent of the LDC as it stands, this would not be allowed.
We appreciate your interpretation.
Thank you.
I do have one question.
No, probably wouldn't. You probably If you insist, Tony, go ahead.
I only have one question. Because we are reviewing a director's decision, they can come back for a variance, and that would not be an issue. Is that correct?
That's exactly right. And, I mean, and from hearing their arguments, they sound very reasonable arguments to me for a variance. The interpretation of the code, the appeals, to me, is a very, very serious issue, because you're talking about a global interpretation of the code in general. And appeal, and variance is a particular issue for a particular piece of property. And I feel much more comfortable with a variance. I think staff would not have any objection to a variance, as they stipulated tonight, with, conditions of the lot, and so forth. That we would have no problem with that. But again, the appeal is something that we take very seriously, and we try to defend strongly, because when you start chipping away the code, start chipping away, the code starts losing its significance. And where you stop at, and it can be a slippery slope to where you have things happening that you may not have anticipated when you make a decision, but the evolution of that decision plays out into more and more things that are trying to be included in there. That's why we strongly, defend these interpretations, and would strongly suggest a variance in this case.
We appreciate it, Mr. Dice. Mr. Watson, do you have anything to add to this discussion? Rebuttal?
I want to waste a lot of time, because I don't know how much that does his job, and everybody has a thankless job here. So I mean, I literally, we appreciate his help and every guidance that he's given us. And y'all being here late this evening, I understand what they're saying about the administrative versus the variance. The reason that we're couched the way that we are is that we received an email from Mr. Dice that didn't know exactly how to interpret it, because quote unquote, it wasn't a letter, it wasn't a letterhead, it didn't deny us, gave us interpretation, because he's trying to help us. And essentially we're at day 29, and it's like, don't know exactly what to do, we've got a scheduling problem, and if we don't do it now, we're gonna have a problem. And so, based on that is the reason why I requested for an administrative decision. Now, it sounds like if I'd asked for a variance, I'd be getting a variance today probably. And administrative decision is a little bit of a controversial one versus the variance. And what you're telling me is I can't switch strings. Okay, so that being said, I think the biggest key is he asked one thing is, where does it end? It ends here today. I'm asking about 2 chimney flumes on top of a deck that is cantilevered 13 feet above the ground. It is, the chimney in himself said it's part of the roof line. And it is built in part of the roof. It is 2 flumes that are placed on top of a deck, and it's enclosed, which would be allowed. Not livable space. We don't even have livable space. We're not trying to circumvent. But I understand the points. But it's not a slippery slope. We're talking about a fireplace. We're talking about a chimney. It is part of the roof line. I think the code allows us to interpret it that it's part of the 18 inches, if we want to go there, the 18 inches above the 8 feet, and it allows that extension. Again, it's not livable area. It is a mechanical device. I was pointing to those because there's other things that clearly show that we're allowing, again, slippery slope, we're allowing air conditioning that clearly is not allowed. If you want to read it, black and white, not allowed. I mean, and so I'm requesting today that y'all grant us what we're asking for. I mean, this is a portable type. There's good people that are not trying to take advantage of the system. And at the end of the day, it's like we said, we've got a small lot, and it's understandable what we're trying to do. I appreciate your time.
No problem, Mr. Watson. Thank you. Motion to close the discussion. We're going to close it. Now, I don't mean to be short, and respect what I'm fixing to say. You do a tremendous job in representing your point. There ain't nothing you can say to do better than what you already have. But sometimes you got the same problem I've got. Okay? I mean, please, let us play. Y'all done a good job. Close the public discussion.
Motion to close.
Second.
Second.
All in favor, aye?
Aye.
Motion?
I'll make a motion to approve.
Second.
And I'm sorry,
Wait,
just
wait.
to clarify,
Yeah.
Mr. Fletcher, would that be a motion to reverse Mr. Dice's determination?
Correct.
Okay.
And I hate to do that to Wayne.
Second.
I'll second it.
Discussion.
I'd just like to discuss a couple of things if I may.
Sure. I'll open it for discussion.
Just real quick, I know, that you're saying that, I think you said that you tried to come to a
You
decision.
didn't ask him a question.
Okay, sorry.
Yeah.
Well, I think it was told that he was asked to try to come to a conclusion, and I think it had staff that had mentioned the variance, I think this would make it easier for all
Right,
of us.
absolutely.
So I think that was our first mistake. I'm not saying who did it, doesn't matter, but I think it was a mistake made there. If you offer people alternatives and they don't take them, then that would be their mistake. I don't think an alternative was made here. The second thing is Mr. Dice's opinion, because that's his job. But you also have to consider that if he no longer works in that position and somebody else was there, their opinion very well may not be the same as his. So I don't think the code is clear, updated, evolved, and it needs to.
I think he implied that, but I just look at the points that Tony made about the other structures that can be out there, and this to me should conform if they do. So that's my opinion.
I don't want to interject. I just want to clarify one point that Tammy brought up. The applicant did ask for an opinion from Mr. Dice or an interpretation of the code, and Mr. Dice would have been remiss not to
Right.
inform him to
He-
appeal that
yes.
decision.
I understand.
So I just want to clarify that.
I don't want his job, but I understand.
It is my position on this that it's a mechanical, it's chimney, it's heated, it's mechanical. It may not be a primary heat, but it's still mechanical. I think if you're gonna allow the air conditioning, hot
Right.
water heater, I can't see how you can deny.
Yeah,
If
that's
it went to circuit court, I think the judge would say that it's a mechanical use.
Even if it's encased as part of
It's
Structure.
mechanical.
yeah.
If you allow the air conditioning to sit on the outside, hot water to sit on the outside, then you can't have a fireplace without a chimney, and you allow those use, and I think this should be allowed under the mechanical use of the chimney.
Is the hot water heater allowed?
Yes.
Here's what's hard about this.
No, it's
The
not
code
like
doesn't
that.
give an exception for the equipment either,
But
Right.
it's never been interpreted,
but it's been consistently treated that way. But no one's gone back to fix it, even though they know it's a potential problem. We're in a catch-22.
it's been allowed.
Yes.
Therefore, you're not opening up a whole new can of worms or allowing something that's not allowed if it's mechanical. And therefore, it's mechanical.
It's
You can't
mechanical.
have a chimney.
It's not habitable space. You can't stand in there. You can't do anything with it other than just use it as a piece of equipment.
My reservation though is where it's like it's frame, part of the framed structure, the way they're showing it in the picture, I mean,
If it's a deck.
Water heater's bolted to the wall and it has hundreds of feet of piping that run all through the house. You cannot physically detach it from that structure and have it function. If it was a flue that came out the side,
The question is, can you do away with the concrete and bring it inside so you wouldn't have to? Is there an argument for safety on the fire wall protection?
It's probably safer with it outside too, isn't it?
Right. Well, my position is it's mechanical.
the only issue we run into, hate to be the confusing one, is that the code doesn't give an exemption for the mechanical either. So technically, if we deny this, technically we shouldn't have anything out there.
Right.
But it's allowed. And if you go back now and change it, then you got all of them, it's allowed.
It's been done.
It is allowed. Come on,
It's established.
yes.
He made all the points that convinced me.
That it is. It's
He made all the points that convinced me with all these examples here.
What we fear is this.
Yeah.
This is an abuse of the intent of the code. But you can do that, no problem all day long.
Right.
This happens sometimes. It used to happen more. Thankfully, it's not
Well,
happening.
we allow some of that in this, I think, last year, that we probably shouldn't have in the whole house. I think that this is not setting precedent, that we're going to continue to allow that to happen. But there again, I feel like this is mechanical.
I feel it's mechanical. I feel that it's allowed. It's been an accepted, if not written, use. But I don't disagree with Mr. Dice's position in that he took that position. I understand,
Yeah.
given his limitations and what he has to interpret from. But it is an allowed use. All this equipment has been accepted over time. Ventilation, equipment, panel boxes, meters, all of that.
Yeah.
Anything else?
Well, I mean, and you're saying that the problem is mechanical hasn't been addressed, clearly.
Absolutely hadn't.
And I agree that, and I think it needs to be, but that's neither here nor there, but it does say that the roof, if we can argue that that is part of the roof, it's attached. It doesn't go all the way to the ground.
It's not a roof. A roof is a defined thing. That's an overhang.
It's
A roof
part of.
overhang is a defined
Well,
element.
You consider part of the overhang, no?
No.
Okay. Because I know what you're saying, you're trying to get the language to,
No, the roof is a established thing. I mean, it is a tangible, legally defined item.
but I thought the point was is the appeal is gotta be properly languaged.
We do that once we're done.
Okay.
Kevin, anything else?
No.
Mr. Fletcher?
No, sir.
Colin?
No.
Motion to close the discussion.
So moved.
Second.
We have appeal of the planning department decision. Our, it's not a motion, but is to uphold the request of the appeal.
I believe Mr. Fletcher's motion was to reverse Mr. Dice's interpretation of the code.
Whatever
And
you
just-
tell me, I have to
And
state
just to
it.
clarify, this is only relating to chimneys. Is that
Correct.
correct? Okay. I think that would be sufficiently worded.
Now, what are you going to do?
Good. So I think Mr. Fletcher's motion was to reverse Mr. Dice's interpretation of the code only as it relates to chimneys. Is that right, Mr. Fletcher?
Correct.
Okay. And I guess just for the record, if you would
I would
second that.
How do you vote?
I vote with Bill, aye.
Aye.
To be clear, aye.
Kevin?
Aye.
Mr. Fletcher?
Aye.
Tony?
Aye.
Aye. He voted aye.
Aye.
What did you vote?
All unanimous.
All voted aye. Mr. Watson, I think this is the first time in Mr. Dice's career that he has been overturned.
I'll buy you a beer, Wayne.
Celebrate, right? Yeah, absolutely. You did receive your,
I hate to, yeah.
Thank you. Thank you, sir.
Mr. Dice, it's nothing personal.
Okay.
We wish that our next item on the agenda. Where are we at? Number five?
I believe it's number 6.
Which was variance. Who's here to represent State your name for the record.
My name's John Bridges, I'm the agent for Richard Squire, and REAR property. Bridges.
You want to go ahead and present your request for the
Sure,
variance?
we're requesting a 2-foot variance to the setback requirement on the front. Wasn't really anything intentional, it's actually just kind of a cumulative error that precipitated the mislocation of the building on the site. The site is not rectangular, and we actually ended up having a cantilever. We shifted the building over 18 inches to accommodate the cantilever within the setback. We have plenty of room on either side, and also we shifted down the original originally when we got the information to the contractor to shift it over, so we shifted over 18 inches and down 2 feet. Somewhere along the translation, the down 2 feet did not make it, and we did not discover that the building was in the setback until the final survey was done. So it wasn't anything intentional. We had plenty of room to move the house down, but said it missed on several counts. Surveyor, the contractor.
Who's your surveyor?
Yeah.
Curl?
Right.
W.W. Curl?
Yeah, right.
We had an issue with him a few years ago.
Not sure exactly why it wasn't caught.
Was it his issue? Was it his issue? Was it the builder's issue?
Well, maybe a little bit of both.
Who's your builder?
The builder is RAER Properties.
Who?
RAER Properties, an LLC, group of investors.
They are the builders?
One of the members of the LLC is the builder.
Is this their first time building in Walton County?
No, we've done some other projects here as well.
Pardon me?
We've done some other projects here as well.
What is the name of the building? What is,
Sandcastle Developers,
is there a person name?
Richard Squire.
So he's building a steakhouse?
Yes.
He's building a steakhouse, he has a lot large enough to put the house on, because nobody paid attention, they're over 2 feet, 18 inches.
Yes.
And the house has been built?
The house is built, it's about
Complete.
75, 80% complete.
But it's not the foundation, how much of it's subject?
Well, all the structures in place, really the only thing that hasn't been done or finished, I believe it's all dried in, electrical, plumbing, HVAC, already in place. Basically, we'd end up having to chop off the corner of the garage and porch. It actually extends the setback in 2 spots. The garage actually extends like 0.97 feet into the setback, and the porch extends into the setback 1.97 feet.
And you did take that off?
Excuse me?
You have removed it?
No, we have.
That's what he would have to remove.
That's what we're asking for the variance. So it would cost thousands of dollars for them to chop off the corners of those.
Alright, what's in the setback?
I'm sorry.
What did you say was in the setback, the porch?
So a corner of the porch and a corner of the garage.
A corner.
Right. Like I said, the lot is not rectangular shaped. On the northwest corner, there's a cul-de-sac, so it's got a radius property line. And that was one of the things I think that contributed to nobody noticing. I think if it were rectangular, we wouldn't have an issue.
Right.
You talking about that?
That's right, the northwest.
So you're only talking about a small portion?
Exactly. It's both pieces are triangle shaped. Just, like I said, the longest distance is 0.97, 1.97 feet, both
So it probably wouldn't take all a day to cut it off and fix it?
No, it would take much longer than that. The garage has a second story above it. So we would have to remove.
So you know
It would take probably several days at the minimum.
do you have a survey in here showing it?
Exhibit G shows it pretty well.
Right, on the site plan.
Okay.
The
How
portion
much-
in black,
Right, the shaded area,
How much is,
the two areas in first.
it's about a foot in each side. It's the corner of the garage.
you estimating about a foot on each side?
Yeah, I mean, just looking at the picture, I mean, it'd take the whole corner off.
Right,
It's a terrible spot to do it.
Yeah.
it is, right, that's what I'm saying, it would need more than just kind of trim off an edge or something. It would cost literally thousands of dollars and, probably 2 to 3 weeks at least to refinish it and chop that corner. Not to mention that aesthetically, probably would look much better.
Anyone have a question?
Yep.
Everyone knows what, do you know what you,
This one,
you see it?
this one and this one. I guess the one I'm just questioning.
You see it?
Yeah. Okay, but both floors, I've seen the one on the, okay.
Shows the point.
We'll give you the opportunity to come back after we hear from the staff. Okay? You're talking about that?
This corner and this one.
Yeah.
Something like
These
that.
two corners representing this end and this one.
Hey, you can,
Let's sit in, go ahead.
Well, I think at times the board is allowed to grant variances when, for setbacks when hardship has been shown. And the building is 75% done, being properly shown a hardship. Is that for you to make that determination to grant variance to the setback?
Any questions?
Nope.
Thank you. You want to add anything?
Not really, we're just really kind of throwing ourselves on the court, as it were. Again, we didn't really have a good excuse, it wasn't intentional, it was just, like I said, accumulation of errors on several people's parts.
Okay, if you're not gonna get up, that's good.
Motion to close.
Second,
Second.
motion to approve. Motion to disapprove.
wait,
Motion to tear down.
Wait, Tony's got a question.
Too late.
the pool's in the whole setback.
The what is?
There's a pool. Is that the setback in the back?
I don't believe we're within the setback. Pool hasn't been installed yet.
I believe that the red dashed line is the setback around, is that the setback around the property or is that something else?
The dotted line you're
The
showing?
bottom line is the setback.
Yeah. We've got another
That's
issue.
why I would not have the survey. Mr. Vice?
Mr. Holmes, closing computer out. I want to speak, yes, sir.
Can you look at it?
He quits.
I've been bad luck tonight, I better not.
So you want us to go ahead and approve this pool too?
Pardon me?
You want us
Jimmy,
to approve,
Jimmy
to
variant, something?
approve the pool also?
I haven't looked at it, sure. For the Jimmy, I'd say go for it.
Make it two.
That's right, too.
Which we really don't take it personal.
Put a fireplace in the pool. and you-
Well, Tony raises,
Well, I'm just,
We need to come back up. We're gonna open it back up for discussion.
do we need a
Are you
motion?
aware that your pool is outside, is inside the setback? Would you agree with that?
as they
If it
show
was
it.
on there, I would agree with it.
So you knew it?
I did not know that
Well-
the pool actually counted against the setback. I
You
was
did not
unaware of
know,
that.
pardon me?
I was unaware of that.
You were unaware that the pool
The
had
pool
been,
counted right within the.
So the pool's not in?
It is not, has not been installed yet, so if we need to adjust that, we can adjust.
Yeah,
And-
boy.
And I'm not sure, I'm going by their
Yeah.
setback because they may be pulling off a long line because there's an easement in the back. But I don't know, but their lot line actually goes,
Well, part
all
of
the
the
way to
confusion
Chase.
originally we were gonna face the house, the front of the house was facing Ship Lane, which is actually on the other side of that easement.
Right.
And then, I guess 3/4 of the way through the project, they decided to make the other side of it, the front of the house. So we actually have two fronts of that, as far as aesthetically, we have two fronts on that house.
Where do you see it?
So
This
the
is-
setback
This
actually
is
would
the
be
boundary
15
line.
feet on the rear, right?
Well, I see that, but the boundary line back
Right,
there.
so we're at that line.
Yeah,
actually
but they
should-
have a easement that they're showing a setback line from the and they're specifying as 15 foot from utility easement.
That's right, I believe that's how it is interpreted on that lot. The setback line is supposed to be from that easement line, and not the property.
But I don't know if that's an association or a county requirement. It's just really thrown. I
I think
mean,
it's it was in the covenant that way.
so it's a covenant, not a county.
And the setback, still showing 20 foot on the front, but that's actually the rear now, so it should be 15 feet. So this actually should be adjusted.
Yes, 15 is what they show.
Okay, all right.
I'm just, again, I saw something weird and it looks funny, and
All right, well, that's a completely separate issue.
now we can still accept their agreement.
Right.
They just can't build the pool
Right.
if they do have an issue.
Do they have an issue if it's a 33-foot utility easement? Do they still?
Normally, the county does not go from the easement; they would go from the
Go from
property
the property
boundary.
line.
However, they're showing it specifically and calling it out as. But that again, it's outside of our scope. Maybe we should just
Yeah.
ignore it and deal with the corner. And they don't have the pool in yet, so it's not an issue at the moment.
Not yet. Yeah.
Okay.
The easement is the rear setback or the easement, whichever is greater. If they're not in the easement, then it's 15.
But I think in further covenants, the building can't set more than 15 feet from that easement line.
Okay.
Yeah.
That'll be for them to determine.
Yeah.
The other direction.
Yeah. Yeah, they'll have to determine that, but they don't have it in.
Public discussion again. Thank you.
Sorry, Mr. Chairman.
All right, now's the time.
All right.
Motion to close the public discussion.
I hadn't noticed that.
One more time.
Motion to close.
Second.
All in favor, aye?
Aye.
Motion,
I make a motion to approve.
Second.
discussion.
Wait, who made a motion?
Tony and
Yeah,
Mr.
second.
Fletcher.
Mr. Fletcher.
And you made a motion to approve?
Approve the variance.
Any discussion? Tammy, how you vote?
Aye.
Aye? Kevin?
Aye.
Fletcher?
Aye.
You received your variance.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Appreciate your time.
Make sure you're cool right now.
Right, well,
You only get one a year.
Joe, you want one of these?
Mr. Johnson's been cracking a lot of jokes tonight.
Oh, I'm. That's right.
And absolutely. Yeah. I didn't get no too high.
I sold the dickens out of them
We,
He's tough, isn't he?
To approve the minutes on the December. Motion to approve the minutes. Danny, you want to approve?
Yeah.
Kevin, you want a second? All in favor, aye?
Aye.
Kevin.
Motion to adjourn,
So moved.
second.
Second.
All in favor, aye?
Aye.
Thank you,
You get all this stuff, don't you, Carrie?
Here, I'm just leaving it right there.
Thank you, Tony.
I didn't know I had it.
Should it be at home or in your car?
Did you find
I
mine?
didn't take it. I never take my book.
I'm going through here.
Yeah.
Never take my book.
Did you find mine?
Never back in
very beginning.
I might have an old one lined
I
up.
think I did the first time. I really.
All right, well, I'll make you a new one.
Aaron,